Welcome to Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
All right. Hi, everyone. This is Gary Wilson, and welcome to this week's version of the podcast, Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women. I appreciate you being on board. Chiropractors, dentists, engineers, pilots, military, teachers, firemen, policemen, those seem to be the most popular groups. But really anybody, if you own your own business or you own your own practice, generally speaking, you're really liking this podcast because this is for people who invest. Again, it's not the no money down stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that stuff doesn't work. It has its place, but these are for folks that really, want to buy real properties with real money, making real profits. So that's our home. We do invest honorably and ethically. We improve the neighborhoods we invest in because when you do that, guys, everybody wins. When you invest in the community, your profits are more valuable. Your tenants, they love living there, and you profit as an owner. If you want to be part of that community, we have a community we've been building over the last few years. Folks just like us, people that own their own business typically, or professionals in our fields. And you can join that. Go to myinvestmentservices.com. Look for the information on becoming a member. There's different levels, and be part of the group because we share techniques and tools and strategies. We put inventory on there. We know it's off-site, so it's off-market. So these aren't things you're going to see out in the general public. And basically learn from each other. And we get together, by the way, 4 times a year for 3-day events. One of them is coming up April 5th, 6th, and 7th in Anaheim Marriott, right outside the gates of Disneyland. So look for the information on that. And also on the podcast, if you've been watching and listening, obviously go ahead and subscribe. There's like 75 different channels, iTunes, iHeartMusic, of course, the 2 biggies, but they're all about 75 different channels you can subscribe to. So in any case, welcome aboard. I've got a special guest tonight. His name is Gary Jonas. Gary and I have been both members of the same mastermind group going back about 4 years now. I think Gary joined right before I did, about 6 months before I did. We're both named Gary, so that's pretty good. And we both invest in real estate, obviously, and we both have developed and created multiple companies related to that whole genre of real estate investing. So without further ado, Gary Jonas, I want to appreciate you for coming on board here. Hope you're doing okay out there in Philadelphia right now.
Doing wonderful. Happy to be with you.
Good. Yeah, I'm actually in right now San Clemente, California. I'm looking out over Dana Point Harbor, and it's about 60 degrees and sunny. So I'm gonna go have dinner here in a bit. But I understand you guys had some cool weather recently there, and even some snow coming your way.
We do. It's supposed to snow tomorrow, and the name of the snowstorm is Winter Storm Maya. And I have a 13-year-old daughter named Maya. So
that's hilarious. So, hey, Gary, what I want to do is, if you don't mind, I mean, I know who you are. A lot of the guys in our group know who you are. But for the folks that are new, that are not familiar with you, if you wouldn't mind, just share a little bit about your story, who you are, how you came up. I mean, if you need to go back to high school or college, that's fine. But the reason I like to do this is it lets people get to know you a little bit better. And then when you guys and I get into content, it's going to be much more relevant. They'll see themselves in you. You follow what I'm saying? So if you don't mind, as much as you're willing to, share a little bit about yourself,
Sure. So I am a born and raised Philadelphian. I have 16 years of Catholic school under my belt. And when I graduated from college, I graduated with a finance degree, really having no idea what it was that I wanted to do, and was lucky enough to land my first job as a bill collector for a finance company.
Oh, wow.
And at the time, Gary, they didn't have computers and stuff. You went to like a Rolodex and you pulled cards out and you looked at the card and say, hey, Jane Smith said she was going to make her payment today. And then you would call her and say, hey, Jane, where's your payment? And by the end of the month, if she didn't make her payment, you had to go knock on her door and try and get the money from her. It was by far the worst job that I think anybody could ever have. And I was like, I got to figure out something else to do. I made it 6 months doing that. And after 6 months, I was lucky enough to get a job working for a mortgage company. And so I was working for a mortgage company, and I was starting to see people buy properties, and all of a sudden they'd have more than one property on their 1003, which is kind of the thing you use to go out and get a mortgage, right? Okay. And as I started to see that, I was like, that's interesting. And, I would see a lot of doctors, lawyers, firemen, And the ones that were really creating worth, they were doing it because they owned real estate along with whatever was their job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had made the decision after I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad for the first time, back, I guess, in the mid 90s, that, I wanted to own my grand plan was I was going to own 15 properties. I was going to pay them off by the time I was 45, and I was going to have $150,000 in cash flow coming in, and I was going to retire. That was the plan. So at 25 or 26, I bought my first property and just started going down that road.
Okay.
And then what ended up happening from there is I ended up starting my own mortgage company because that was kind of my main business. And me and 3 partners, we started that and ran a very successful mortgage company.
Mm-hmm.
Bought a property here or there on the side, nothing big deal, just dabbling a little bit and getting to that goal. And at that time, I had accumulated probably 10 properties, all single families, all within, 5 miles of where I lived. And none of them made any money, right? Like you were just trying to grow appreciation at that time in the market.
Yeah.
Then 2008 hit us, and our mortgage business had to change significantly because of the environment that it was in. And so we ended up having to take our mortgage company within the course of a week and come up with a new business plan, or we were going to be out of business. And so what we were able to do was partner with the bank because they had better cost of funds and things than we had. And through that process, that left me with nothing to do, right? Because all the things I did, now this bank did for us. So most people would look at that and say, this is really bad. You worked on this company, you owned it for 10 years, and now you're partners, you have nothing to do. We, of course, looked at it significantly different and said, this is great. Now we can have 2 guys do what 4 guys used to do. And you 2 other guys, you go out and buy real estate.
Okay.
And so in 2008, with no real plan other than, hey, it's our job to go buy real estate, we went out and started looking for ways to develop real estate in the Philadelphia market. And that was kind of our entree into that business.
Okay.
And we just had to time it. We got lucky and we timed it exactly perfect, right? The exact bottom of the market with no real inventory. And so we just kind of started working our way through it, buying a little house and rehabbing it. Now, of course, we wanted to be in the cash flow business. So we weren't in this kind of flipping module. We were in this, let's buy it, let's hold it, let's collect cash flow from it. We were lucky enough to have this other business, which was this mortgage business making money. So the real thing that happened for us is we were still making money in the mortgage business. So we didn't have to make money on the real estate piece of it. We could just start to accumulate assets, which I think is a really important point for people that are starting to do this. Like if you start to do this and you're counting on the income from it from day one, I think it's a very difficult process where guys that have another source of income and then start to do this long term, they can really create some great things. And so, if I fast forward you through the story so we can get, forward, we started off with little single family properties and now we own 750 doors in and around Philadelphia, over $1.2 million in cash flow from those properties. And we've parlayed that into not only a real estate business, but a construction company, a property management company, a real estate outsale company, and then our development company. So we essentially have, and of course the mortgage company, which we started with in the beginning. So we went from kind of this mortgage company that was our initial feeder to these 6 companies that are all generating revenue for us now. And it happened over, 10 or 11 years. So it's an 11-year process from we started getting out of the mortgage part of the business and do all this other stuff to where we sit now.
Yeah.
So that's the story in a nutshell.
Well, that's a pretty good story, man. I love the fact that you recognize some of the leverage points here. So in other words, you've got a mortgage business, you're doing some investing on a smaller scale, single family homes, life throws you the big recession, but instead of you seeing it as a problem, the funny thing is an old saying, the problem isn't the problem. The problem is how you look at the problem, right? And if you can see the opportunity, because every problem, I'll call it a challenge, also provides some opportunity. It just has to. It's a natural part of the human experience. And then all of a sudden, what you used to think it was a problem becomes the opportunity, right? So you did that, and you started investing more heavily and realizing you can build these other companies. Like for me personally, I did property management too. I started with my own, managing my own, And then I leveraged that to offer that team of people I had to provide services for other clients. And all of a sudden, I'm like, man, I didn't have to even do anything. I already had the core structure there because I have my own properties. All I did is incorporate it and open up this other channel. And I already had the clients because I was already certain you had clients already through brokerage, through mortgage. I had clients through brokerage. So almost identical paths. But the cool thing is I know you've grown and now you got 750 doors and you're doing bigger and bigger purchases, which leads me to something I learned I want to ask you about. Like I want to get into the like how you do what you do. So in other words, I bought small properties and moved my way up to buy bigger properties. And I always look for value purchases. In other words, I can buy properties that have deferred maintenance and then put a lot of construction behind that and improve all those, take care of all the deferred maintenance, make the property more valuable, raise the rents, all that. But I could also look for properties that are mismanaged. So it's a different type of a challenge. And properties where the rents are lower than they should be, they have a lot of vacancies. I mean, we can move in there and within a year turn a sizable property around and make it extremely profitable. But having described those two scenarios with you, I know there was one you were working on a few years ago. I forget the number of units in the building, but you had bought it and you put a lot of work into it, need a lot of improvements and upgrades. But would you mind taking one of your properties and walk us through the how part? Because I want people listening to this to realize, just like me, you started off at the beginning with one property. I started off with half of a house. I couldn't even buy a whole house, right? And through persistence and consistency and applying methodologies and being patient, like you mentioned, patience, which is a big thing. Don't expect to make a windfall on day one, but expect to make a windfall over a long period of time. And then we are where we are. But people only see where we are now. They don't see the prior, in my case, 33 years. So in your example, can you think of one in the last few years where you bought a building and maybe it was a dog with fleas, but you cleaned it up, you fixed it up, and now you got yourself a shining gem with a cash flow machine,
Sure. I mean, look, there's a bunch of different ways to kind of get to this end result, but I would tell you two things. One, I don't know that you asked this, but I think this is really important for people. When you start out and you're buying a single family house here and you're buying this, you're kind of in a residential mindset, right? So you only know what is this kind of residential market, and you can only buy 4 properties and have them financed, and there's a certain way to get this loan, and all of these things that are kind of the only thing because prior to this, all you bought is your primary residence or maybe one investment property, right? And as soon as you start to deal for the first time with people that are professionals within this business and talk to somebody that knows how to finance properties that are commercial properties, and a commercial property can be a 6-unit building, it can be a 5-unit building, right? It's anything over a 4-unit building. The ironic part about it is you would think that it gets harder as the projects get bigger to do financing and do this stuff. And what you find out is that it's the exact opposite. That gets easier, right? And so our big aha moment for us when we were going from doing one house to maybe we did a duplex and maybe we did a 4-unit building, and we're like, never going to get there. It costs so much money to do this and takes so much time, and you can only make so much on a 1, 2, 3, 4-unit building, right? So how are we ever going to get to these goals and end results? And by happenstance, because my job in the beginning was not only to find the properties, but I had to rent them and collect the rent and do all that stuff. And a tenant had a problem, and I was at their house fixing the problem. And she was like, hey, you should talk to my boyfriend. He does commercial financing. And I was like, okay, great. And he showed us how to actually do a commercial loan for the first time. And we bought our first 6-unit building.
Right.
And because buildings that are commercial are valued based off of income more than they're valued based off of just, what have 3 other properties around them sold for, it made it much easier to go through the process of financing deals and getting our capital back and continuing to go through this process.
Right.
So one of the things I think is really important for people to understand is that if you're going to get involved in buying properties, and you know this, right? The team that you put around you is really important. Right. And so to get that team and make sure that your finance person and the person that's going to do your property management and the person that's going to do your construction, like those 3 people are critical to your success, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure, Gary, that one of the things that's great about working with you is you help people through that process, right? help them
Absolutely.
understand, all of those different pieces. So I think that's critically important to how you move forward as you get into this process.
Yeah.
So I know that didn't answer your question, and I am going to answer your question
Okay.
about, hey, did we buy a project
Yeah.
that had some hair on it, and what did it look like? And so I'm going to give you the bigger project, and then I'm going to give you the smaller project,
Okay.
right? So I'll start kind of most recently, right? So one of the things that we found in our market, and I think you'll see this in most urban markets across the country, is that people are realizing that density is important to keep commercial corridors and places like that going, right? You just need to have more people to have eyes on the street, to have successful, neighborhoods. And so what's happening in cities are changing their zoning codes, and the codes are changing to allow more density.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found is that there's two kinds of people that are developers. There's guys that build new construction,
Mm-hmm.
and there's people that buy existing buildings and fix them up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's generally not people that do both. So one of the opportunities that we ended up seeing was, hey, look, the code's changed. And there's these big old garden style apartment buildings, right? And if nobody knows what a garden style apartment building is, that's where you see those kind of 2-story apartment buildings that there's a whole bunch of them on one site, right? It could be 100, 200 units, and they all kind of go around some type of courtyard or garden style center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw one of those, and it was for sale, and based on its sales price, it wasn't worth what the guy had it listed for. But there were two issues with it, right? One, it was mismanaged, like you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
It was an 88 unit building that was currently mismanaged. So we had that going for us, which was we could fix it up and we could increase the rent on the units, and that was going to help us. But not only that, it sat on a pretty big piece of land, and based on the zoning code, we could build more units on it.
Mm-hmm.
So what we were able to do is buy this building, fix up the existing units to increase their rent, but not only that, but build 24 additional units on the site.
Nice.
So we bought built 24 additional units on that site. And so that extra 24 units is, you got the land basically for nothing.
Right.
So we took a deal that nobody could kind of get their hands around, and we're able to take that deal and make it a huge profit margin deal for us. So that building probably now is worth somewhere between 17 and 19 million, and has like $12 million in debt on it.
Wow.
Like we created a real home run. We don't find a lot of those projects, but
right.
if you can look at the market, see where the opportunity is, you can really take some projects and hit some home runs.
Yeah. I love that example, and then you said you had a smaller one, a smaller example too.
Yeah. So, so we will look at a lot of smaller buildings as well. And what we found is, so there's the standard kind of buy an existing building and fix up the units as they are and
Mm-hmm.
increase the rents $100 or $200, right? Like per unit. That's kind of a standard syndication rehab model. And what we found is a good niche for us is not to do that, but to buy older buildings that are historic and fix them up and make them apartment buildings.
Okay.
Right. So along those same lines, we were able to buy a tiny little church that, was 150 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it sat on a big piece of land. And we bought the church for $450,000 because nobody knew what to do with the church, right? It was just kind of, it was a small church. Nobody knew what to do with it.
Yep.
And so it was really well located next to a train station and a good downtown area. And what we were able to do is subdivide the lot. We sold the back part of the lot that had nothing on it, $450,000, which was our purchase price for the church. And then we owned the church and the land for nothing, and we were able to put 9 apartments in there. So we took the church, we converted it to 9 apartments, and we had a great deal, right? And we were thrilled because we had the land for nothing. We put the 9 apartments in there, and we're making some money. So now you want to hear the best part about that story?
Yeah.
The guy we sold the land to, right?
Mm-hmm.
I call this my $1 million mistake. We sold the land to the guy. I thought he was going to build townhouses on them that would be worth $400,000 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
He built 5 townhouses on the land. Guess what they were worth?
$1 million.
$600,000 a piece. No, he sold them $600,000 a piece. And so that's $200,000 more than I thought they were worth times 5 houses. That's $1 million.
Yep.
So I got a great deal. He got an even better deal.
That's amazing.
But as my biggest saying goes, right, you never go broke making money. I made money on the deal. He made money on the deal. everybody was happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Don't ever be afraid to pull out profit when you can do it easily, because you can't go wrong pulling out profit. I mean, you make money. So, but it was interesting, the church project, one of my students right now is doing a church conversion in Milwaukee, and she's turning it into a wedding venue. Amazing, awesome
Okay.
property. Just, several million. She bought it, by the way, she bought it for $450,000, ironically, Um, but
There you go.
yeah. At the end of the day, she's in the underwriting right now. I mean, the thing's going to be worth about $12 million when she's done, based on the pro forma. She's already sold for her next year. She's already sold 20% of the weddings for the entire year. One event, she went to one wedding show, and booked up a business for 20% of her revenue projections for the entire year. So, but it just goes to show you, man, opportunity is out there in abundance. And what I impress upon people is this: is you didn't just stick with one type of property. You opened up your field of vision and allowed yourself to entertain opportunities that you might not have previously considered if you only were focused on single family homes, for example. And it's one of the things that I've learned. Everybody like you that I've learned to get to know and admire and respect, they have that trait. It's like they see, like, success breeds success, and you see opportunity where people who have tunnel vision won't even recognize it. And a church is 9 units in one church. That's amazing. And you got to repurpose the building. There, for all intents and purposes, I mean, I've only seen people do restaurants and breweries in old churches. Now I'm seeing apartments. I've seen student housing, and of course now the wedding venue. But I appreciate you sharing those two stories. I also want to emphasize something. I also learned over the years, I thought when I started buying the bigger properties, it was going to get a lot more difficult. It actually didn't. The financing alone was a lot easier. I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty easy. Buying a couple $1 million building, you would think it'd be a lot tougher. It actually was easier. I mean, have you found the same thing, like when it comes to financing?
It's 100 times easier. I
Yeah.
mean, the rules are very simple. It's much more relationship based. It's much more, do I believe that Gary's going to repay me, and is this a good building? And
Yeah.
if those two things are facts, then you're in pretty good shape. And the underwriting doesn't really vacillate from one person to the next. Once
Right.
you understand all those metrics, it's pretty simple to push through this process. So I totally agree that
Yeah.
that is a way easier process.
Yeah. Hey, one of the things I want to ask you about too, and I, by the way, appreciate you saying that. One of the things I ask you about is I know you're in the Philly area. And by the way, I was flying back. I was in Virginia yesterday, flew back here to Orange County. And I'm pretty sure on the flight I saw the 76ers beat the tar out of somebody. It was 100. They scored like 140 something points.
143 points against the Lakers. That is correct.
It was. Oh my gosh, how's that for irony?
Mm-hmm.
So,
that was beautiful. That's probably the most points they've scored in 5 years. So we are excited about our Sixers here.
yeah, good time to be a Philadelphia sports fan, man. Last year, right, the Super Bowl, and not this past, but the one before, of course. And in any case, hey, when it comes to the where, like I've invested in Virginia, Pennsylvania, a number of different areas. In Philadelphia, obviously big metro area, not too far from New York City. There's some higher priced parts of Philly. There's parts that are not so high priced. But one of the things I recognized when I was there last year teaching, I was teaching in the Philly area for about a month. It was like late 2017. One of my nieces, bought a brownstone right downtown for $450,000. Must be something about 450 in today's conversation. She paid for that. And man, Gary, these are properties that 20 years ago we wouldn't have paid 10 grand for. I'm like, holy crap. So when it comes to the where, like inside of Philly, outside of Philly, the metro area, what would people who are listening to this, they're going to probably want to reach out to you at some point and say, man, I want to work with that guy. I want to talk to that guy. But what can you tell them about the where? Like, what have you done inside the city? What about outside the city? There's lots of bedroom communities, dozens of them, all over the Philly area, New Jersey and Philly, where it's wonderful, beautiful parts of the country. But what have you found there as far as like geography goes, or where you are geographically speaking,
Sure. So we have pretty much exclusively stayed with inside the city of Philadelphia's limits.
Okay.
And we've done that for one basic reason. The city of Philadelphia, the greatest economic incentive they've ever passed is what they call a 10-year tax abatement.
Wow.
Which means you only pay taxes on the land So anything that's built on the land, you don't pay taxes on. So if we build a $10 million building on a piece of property that we paid $1 million for, we're paying taxes on $1 million, not $11 million, right? And so right now, to do a deal in the city of Philadelphia, by far the cheapest price point of any major metropolitan city on the East Coast, right? And you have a 10-year tax abatement. The cash flows on those properties are just so much significantly better than everywhere else that, it's in our backyard. We've set up our construction company to build there. We can control the whole process. And so for us, right now, we have stayed inside of that market. We are starting to look outside of it a little bit because we feel that from a competition standpoint, it's becoming very difficult to continue to find good deals. Right. So we are starting to look outside of the Metro Philly area. And when we're doing that, the metrics that we're looking for are pretty simple, right? We're looking for job growth, and we're looking for new construction starts, right? So three things: job growth, population growth, and new construction starts. And by looking at those three numbers, we can say, okay, well, there's definitely a need in this market. They have good employment, the population is increasing, and there's not enough housing being built. Okay. It meets metric number one. So then it really just comes down to metric number two, which is, can we build there do the rents match up to the cost to build and acquire? Yeah. Right. That's the second piece of what we have to look at. And so we've identified a couple East Coast markets that we're going to go out and look at. We had a bunch on our radar. We had Orlando. We had, some areas in North Carolina, Cleveland, Columbus, Ohio. We had 5 or 6 areas, and we're starting to narrow it down to 1 or 2 that are an hour or 2 plane ride from where we're at, where we feel like those metrics are good. It's close enough that we can get there and really manage the process. But if we go there, we won't go to build new construction, right? Yeah. If we go there, we'll go and we'll buy existing buildings, and we'll learn the market, and we'll work our way slowly through it to a new construction product.
Well, that's pretty awesome. Hey, one more big subject is time. Like, I know whenever I work with new investors, inevitably 1 out of 10 times I'll get this I call it the famous objection, which is, well, I'm going to wait to buy. I'm going to wait till the market does this, market does that, and then I'll buy then, as if we have a magic ball and we can predict all this stuff. What I found out is over the years, the most successful investors, we're always in the game. It's not that we don't care about the economy. We just want to know what it's doing, and then we can apply whatever strategy makes the most sense at that time. But in your growth, I mean, you were growing during the Great Recession, and you were also growing even before that. So when it comes to time, like time frames, economically speaking, have you found that it really does? You can make money in any economy. What's been your experiences? I guess let me just, instead of me trying to kind of create the answer for you, tell me from your experience, what have you found out when it comes to time or timing in the business of real estate investing?
So I think that's a great question, and there's a couple points that I want to make on this topic. The first of which is, look, if you're a professional investor, just like a professional investor in the stock market, you really can't time the market, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody, nobody knows what's going to happen one way or the other. So what do you have to do? You have to look at how you can mitigate your risk, and you have to understand that it's the stuff you have in development that when the market changes, that's your project's at risk, right? Mm-hmm. Like stuff that you own that's already up and running, that's already collecting rent. Generally, when prices go down, rents don't go down, right? Right. So if you're buying and holding properties, in theory, rents go up when prices go down because less people are buying, more people are renting, and in theory, rents go up, right? Mm-hmm. So when you take that out of the equation, where you say, hey, at the very least, they're going to stay status quo, it tells you that as long as you're buying your property right and you're not taking too much interest rate risk, mm-hmm. you're probably going to be okay as long as you don't overextend yourself. Right. Now, once the market starts to go down, now's your huge buying opportunity. But what happens is somebody buys that one property and they go, hey, I thought this property was going to go up $100,000 in value, and it went down $20,000 in value. I'm no longer investing, and they walk away, right? Yeah. When the reality is, you didn't lose anything on that property because you didn't sell it. When your stock goes down 20% in value, you don't sell the stock. right? You go, all right, well, I'm going to wait, in January, everything went down and then starts to come back up and you kind of wait it out. And the nice thing in real estate is typically you're always making money while you're waiting for the market to come back up in value. Where in stocks and stuff like that, you're not, right?
Right.
And the counterintuitive part of real estate is here's the other thing that I think you and I talked about this, and people don't realize it. Let's say you own a bunch of properties today, right? And you're like, well, I'm going to time the market. I'm going to sell and get all out. I'm going to put my cash on the sidelines. And when the market goes in the toilet, then I'm going to buy it. Right. Now, if you did that 3 or 4 years ago, what happened? You missed 3 or 4 years of potential growth, right? You missed 3 or 4 years of income and you paid taxes and you had a huge gap you got to make up. What I say is, hey, look, when the market goes in the toilet, you know what you should be doing? You should be selling your assets and buying bigger assets.
Right.
Because, if you sell a $100,000 property that goes down 5% in value, it went down $5,000, it's worth $95,000. If you went and bought $1 million asset that went down 5% in value, it went down $50,000 in value. So you got a 5x return or a 10x return on your money by buying in that down market, right?
Right.
But everybody thinks, oh no, I have to hold on to all my stuff because, I'd be losing money if I sold it. And that's not really the case. You always got to be looking at opportunity and you got to understand how money works. Like the thing that I realize more than anything is I love how money works and how transactions work more than I actually love the real estate itself. I love the idea of financial engineering stuff. And I believe that, it takes good management to make these projects work and a good team. But in order to really get the best benefit out of it, you really got to understand the financial component.
Right.
And that's the piece that I think I love the most and is the most, I get that part the most. So if people have questions about that and they're trying to wrap their minds around those things, that's where I can be helpful.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty awesome. I appreciate you sharing that because you're absolutely right. And you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned the word team a couple of times now. And in a few moments ago, we were talking about, building your business. And a lot of people, I've heard them say, well, they have all these limiting beliefs. Well, I don't have a team, for example. I'm like, well, I didn't either when I first started. And neither did you. You built the team as you grew and went along, and so I want everybody to really pay attention and listen to what you're saying and what you're not saying. And the thing is, I know where you started off. I mean, I had a degree in computer science and, I'm probably like the least likely example of someone to be, doing this now, teaching this, but it just goes to show you, boy, if you're just willing to learn and be persistent and consistent over time, it's not the get rich quick stuff. It's the get rich correctly, successfully over a period of time. And it goes fast. I mean, the last 10 years, I mean, look at us now, 2019, 10 years ago, we were in the bottom of that recession. Who'd have thought we'd be wherever now? Well, I mean, I did because I've been through a couple of recessions, but it just goes to show you guys, always be in the game, swinging the bat, and learn from Gary and, listen to his stories and apply what you're learning here. And Gary, if I could, we're getting close here, but I want to, if you don't mind, have one more question. I call it the why question, like why you do what you do, basically what makes you tick. And the reason is everybody on here is going to kind of see a little bit of themselves in you. When they find out what really makes you. I know you've got a family with children. Maybe there's something behind that. I don't know, but if you don't mind, basically wear it on your sleeve for a minute or two, because I think you'll help a lot of people see themselves in you and give them the inspiration they need to jump in this game of real estate investing that we both profited from and love.
Sure. For me, it's interesting because I think that the thing that really hooked me, I've always been restless and uncontent with whatever I'm doing at the time. Like, I can always do more. I can always do better. There's always a way to improve. So, I hated reading and I was really not the greatest of students kind of getting through school. I got through it because I had to.
Yeah.
But I think what I've learned over time is that I just love the idea of growing more than anything else, right? Continuing to learn things and continuing to get better. And I couldn't say, because at the end of the day, I could stop today and be done and really sit at home with my kids. So if I gave you this bullshit, like, oh, I do this for my family and I do this for my kids and I do that's not really true at the end of the day, as much as I'd love to tell you it is. Like I just do it because I love the game. I love the intensity of it. I love the,
Hmm.
the ability to always try something different and always learn, and never, no deal is ever the same. And so
Right.
there's always things happening that push you and make you grow. And so if you're a person that kind of feels like you're always goal oriented, and things are getting a little stale because you're doing the same thing day after day after day, like this is the kind of thing that'll always keep you stimulated. And at the same time, you're building freedom for yourself whenever you want to step into it.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty important stuff. I would tell you, you know, never sit still. I mean, if you're not growing, then you're the opposite of growing is dying. And there's a lot of fulfillment in constantly learning and stretching. The good thing about real estate is in all these businesses, every day is different. Every property is different. Every client's different. Um, and the freedom. Well, for me, Gary, personally, I'd say the number one thing has been the personal freedom. Like you learned about me last time we got to share a shuttle together coming back from Breckenridge, and people ask me, where do I live? I'm like, I really don't live anywhere. I kind of live everywhere. And I could never have done this if it wasn't for me starting 33 years ago buying that first half of a house. I mean, I don't have a gas bill. I don't have an electric bill. I don't have a water bill. I'm literally living completely outside the matrix. And it's the most amazing feeling. I don't know that I could ever go back. If I had to, I would feed my family. But, it's just the freedom. I don't even know how to put it in words. I should probably try to write a book on it, because then I could maybe help more people. But boy, that's the thing for me, is being free to do what I want whenever I want, and not feel guilty about it, not have any restrictions. I do it from a place of contribution, always looking to serve others and how can I help others. Just like Zig Ziglar said, help enough other people get what they want, you'll get plenty of what you want. But in any case, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think I speak for everybody here listening when I say thank you for providing your own personal time. I know it's 20 till 9 your time, and I'm just getting ready to go have dinner. But that shows you come from contribution too. And I've got just a few more things to say here, guys, and I'll wrap this up. But again, if you're listening and you like this, go ahead, subscribe. iTunes, iHeartMusic, look for the 75 different channels this is on. Go to myinvestorservices.com. Become part of the community. There's thousands of us now all across U.S. and Canada, and we're all in this similar circumstances. We want to grow just like Gary has, and we want to do it honorably and ethically and certainly profitably. But hey, Gary, any final thoughts? Like if somebody wants to get a hold of you, if you work with people from like providing funding for investing, anything you want to share, please do so now. I could even put it in the podcast notes for people. But if you do, just or final words of wisdom, if you want to call it that, maybe.
So I do have some final words of wisdom, or things that I think are important. And here's the number one I think is the most important thing if you want to be involved in this business, which is you got to be decisive and you got to be willing to fail, right? Like and when I say that, what I mean is you're never going to get 100% of the decisions right.
Right.
But what I find is people that are willing to make decisions and are willing to be aggressive and get out there, most of the time they're going to figure it out. They're going to figure it out on their own. And so two things, start with something smaller because you're just getting started, right? Don't start with a 20 unit building if you've never done this before, but get started. Don't worry about the fact that you're going to make some mistakes. We all make mistakes. Every time I move from one property class to another property class, I make a bunch of mistakes, and I see people make those mistakes and then give up, you know? And it's like, I'm doing a project now that's a bigger development on the for sale side than I've ever done. And I'm doing the site work later in the process than I should have, right? Because I've never, usually I buy a property, there's already a street there, I build 5 houses in a row and I'm done, right? This particular case, I got to put all kinds of infrastructure in and all these things I've never done before. Well, I'm making a ton of mistakes, right? Yeah. And so I just spend all my time learning and making mistakes. And so if I were to give up, all would be lost. If I just keep moving forward now I've got all that in the bank, and the next time I'm going to get it right, right? So just don't be afraid to take action, and don't be afraid if you make a couple mistakes, because it's going to happen. You're going to get through it. And, if you stick with it, you're really going to have some huge opportunity to have some fun and make some real money.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that would be it. If anybody ever wants to get in touch with me, so I apologize for interrupting you, but if anybody wants to get in touch with me, it's just Gary at howgroup.com. If you're looking at something in and around the Philadelphia area and you have some questions, or you just want to bounce something off of somebody, or understand how we might look at it, certainly feel free to give us a call.
Well, I appreciate that, Gary. It's all for generous of you, and appreciate your words of wisdom too. I think I speak for everybody when I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I look forward to seeing you again soon, dude. Hopefully, when I'm back out in the Philly area end of the year, we'll connect. I'll have you come and speak at one of my 3-day events and share some wisdom, spread some love, and have some fun, man. It
would be my pleasure. Yeah. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, listen, everyone. God bless you and your families. We will see you on the next podcast. And in the meantime, take care, and here's some profit. Gary Wilson and Gary Jonas.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women. Be sure to go to myinvestmentservices.com to join our community and start building wealth today.